John Brisker was an excellent player who was a little bit ahead of his time. He was undersized for a small forward at 6'5", but his muscular frame allowed him to bang down low and crash the glass, as he could also slash a little and draw fouls. But his outside shot was the best part of his game, especially the three-pointer, which is relatively new to basketball in the early 70s. But his game wasn't even the biggest part of him, as he was extremely outspoken. He was also a volatile personality too, as the slightest thing could set him off. He got into so many fights that he was nicknamed the heavyweight champion of the ABA, as his team embraced his enforcer image. Due to his frequent scuffles, the NBA warned teams not to sign him, but Bill Russell, the new executive and coach of the SuperSonics, saw his toughness and signed him to a 5-year deal. John struggled in Bill's no-nonsense system due to his frequent fighting, and he didn't see the floor as much as he did in the ABA. John's fists spoke for him a lot in Seattle, as he even broke a teammate's jaw and knocked out his teeth. But by 1975, John had a very bad reputation and he was out of the league. But in 1978, he left to go to Uganda and he vanished, never to be seen again. Welcome to PZ Hoops, and let's get down to it. John was born on June 15, 1947 in Detroit, Michigan. Not much information about his high school career is available, but after averaging 24 points and 20 rebounds as a senior, he committed to the University of Toledo. The Rockets had an established star in Steve Mix, and he was the primary scorer. John accepted his role as a complimentary piece, and he had a solid sophomore season, averaging 14 points and 9.5 rebounds a game. Toledo had the 11th ranked offense in the nation as they rounded off an 11-game and an 8-game win streak, finishing the season 20-1 with their only loss coming to George Stone and Marshall. As they finished at the top of the MAC, they made the big dance, facing off against Virginia Tech. Toledo was up by 3 at halftime, but they would lose by 6 as the Rockets shot 38% from the field. John put up 15 points and 10 rebounds in the loss. Although John had a productive first college season, he had to deal with coach Bob Nichols, whose conservative approach to the game was a culture shock to him. He was strict about whatever he thought was right on the court, and we couldn't voice any opinions. He didn't respect us as ball players. The only thing he wanted to do was push himself ahead as a coach. He was concerned only with his tactics and how he wanted to handle players on the court. The way things were set up, I had little opportunity to improve and learn. This was a lot different from anything I had experienced, and it helped turn me on to the man and to life. It was the same situation as junior season, as he was second in scoring to Steve again, averaging 15 points and 7 rebounds, as their offense regressed from the year before. The Rockets finished 16-8, missing out on the tournament. Even after John began to see that established procedures in the college ranks might not suit his best interests, he was versatile enough to adjust to the coach's game. In the summer of '68, just before my senior year, I was informed by the coach that I would have to do everything that he wanted or I wouldn't play ball for him again. I couldn't do that, so I told him I didn't need him. Even if I couldn't play basketball for him, I was talented enough to do something else. That year, John went out for football at tight end and led the team in receptions, even getting some NFL interest. When football season ended though, his desire to play basketball was still there. Every day for 2 weeks after football practice at 3 o'clock, I would go to practice with the freshman basketball team at 7. Doing both was a hell of a strain on my body, but that was how badly I wanted to play. John's senior season wasn't anywhere near what he wanted it to be. John and Coach Nichols were still at odds, as John found himself being used in only the tough games and sitting on the bench the rest of the time. After the coach started putting me back on the bench, I developed an ulcer, which I still have, and I started losing my hair. At the same time, other things started to go badly. My grade average took a dive. I chose to quit the team and it became a big controversy. It was played up as me not being able to make it academically, when it was actually the coach and me not making it in any way. I didn't feel like staying at Toledo would be worthwhile. The only thing I could have accomplished was to hurt someone and ruin myself. While I still had my pride and self-respect, which they couldn't strip from me, I left. John quit the team after 6 games, averaging 11 points and 6 rebounds. After he left college, he went back to Detroit, where he played in various tournaments, meeting several pro players. He performed well enough in these games that he was invited to Dave Bing's basketball camp in the Poconos, where he would receive guidance from players like Sonny Dove and Archie Clark. John's name was creating a buzz, and this led to some contract offers overseas, but he was more concerned with staying stateside, as he accepted a contract offer from the Pittsburgh Pipers of the ABA, only after they raised their lowball offer. He was drafted by the Sixers in the 1969 supplemental draft, but they never signed him. The Pipers were still reeling from the loss of Connie Hawkins, but he had a solid front court in Mike Lewis and Stu Johnson. Although Pittsburgh didn't have a lot of depth at small forward, John didn't play a lot of minutes right away, only scoring 4 points in his first 3 games. But in his 4th game, he finally got a chance on October 29th against the Pacers, when he dropped 42 points and 12 rebounds. Over the next 6 games, he dropped over 30 points in 5 of them. Now that he had proven himself, he was now a permanent starter. Despite John's stellar play, his volatile personality made him a wild card amongst his peers. As his teammate Charlie Williams would say, he was an excellent player, but say something wrong to the guy and you had this feeling that he would reach in his bag, take out a gun, and shoot you. John would be ejected for fighting so many times that he was nicknamed the heavyweight champion of the ABA, as the Pipers tried to make the most out of his enforcer image, even portraying him with a pair of 6-shooters on their media guide. John would finish 12th in the league with 21 points a game, along with 6 rebounds and 2 assists. His unique ability to shoot the 3 was one of the best in the league, as he finished in the top 20 in both makes and attempts. Although he was having a great individual season, the Pipers were terrible, finishing second last in turnovers and third last in assists, as they finished 29 and 55, but John made the all-rookie team. In 1970, the team had been sold and the new owners wanted to change the name to the Pittsburgh Pioneers, but a local school already went by that name and threatened to sue them, so the ownership resolved this issue by changing the name to the Condors. Along with the new name, Pittsburgh brought in the new head coach in Jack McMahon. The overall roster didn't really improve that much, but John was given the ultimate green light this season as he would lead the league in shot attempts. In his first 6 games of the season, he dropped 25, 27, 44, 25, 46, and 27, but the team wasn't winning as their attendance numbers were extremely low as well, averaging about 2,800 fans a game, with most people close to the team saying it was actually less than half of that. Despite the lack of team success, John was having the best season of his career as he dropped his career high of 53 points on 20 of 36 shooting and 3 of 5 from 3 on November 12th against the Pacers, followed by 50 points the next game against the Texas Chaparrals. After they started 4-8 on the season, GM Marty Blake decided to give away every available seat in the arena on November 17th against the Floridians. Since the Pittsburgh Civic Arena seated 12,300, the Condors attracted their biggest crowd in team history with over 11,000 tickets given out, but only 8,000 bothered to show up. John put up 30 points and 15 rebounds, but the Condors lost as Matt Calvin put up 40 points, 6 rebounds, and 15 assists. Team ownership was not impressed with Marty's stunt and he was fired soon after. John would fall in love with the 3-point shot this season, shooting 264 of them while making 89 of them, as his 33% clip was 8th best in the league. John would drop 38 20-point games, 22 30-point games, 10 40-point games, and the 2 aforementioned 50-point games, as he and Mike Lewis made the All-Star team. John averaged a career-high 29 points a game, good enough for 3rd in the league, along with 10 rebounds and 3 assists, making the 2nd team All-ABA. Pittsburgh's offense was pretty solid, but their defense was porous, giving up almost 122 points a game, as they finished 36 and 48, missing the playoffs by 1 game. John still got into a lot of fights this season though, as he elbowed Wendell Ladner twice before they fought. The next game they were throwing punches at the jump ball. He was also ejected 2 minutes into a game against the Denver Rockets after elbowing Art Becker. He charged back onto the court 3 times to go after Becker, but a group of police officers threatened to arrest him and finally persuaded him to go back to the locker room. During the spring, he got the opportunity to play in the first ever interleague game between the ABA and the NBA, as the players decided to organize this game without the consent of the owners or either league commissioner, as this game made the possibility of a merger even more real. The ABA lost by 5, but John dropped 14 points against an NBA squad that featured Oscar Robertson, John Havlicek, Nate Thurman, Walt Frazier, and Elvin Hayes. By 1971, John's rough and tumble nature would become widely known around the league. In the summer, future All-Star Billy Knight was practicing with the team while at the University of Pittsburgh. The first time I played a game against Brisker, he just turned towards me and busted me in the mouth, and then he just stood there, waiting for me to do something about it. I didn't do anything, he just scared me. As he had a reputation for bullying guys bigger than him, the Condors brought in an ex-football player to deal with him during training camp. The first time he would step out of line, the footballer would level him. Former ABA team official Dick Tinkham would describe what happened next. So the 2 guys were going at it and the football player said, "To hell with you, I'm going to get my gun." And John said, "If you're getting a gun, then I'm going to get my gun." Then the 2 guys ran off in different directions and the coaches called off practice. The Condors had a nice 1-2 punch with Brisker and George Thompson, as they both were All-Stars, averaging 29 and 27 respectively. John would only play in 49 games though, as the Condors had the best offense but the worst defense. finishing 25-59. The team's attendance sank to all-time lows with under 1,000 fans a game as the ownership began relocating home games in an effort to find a viable spot. There were less than 700 fans at the last game at the Civic Center. The Condors folded after this season, so all of its players were placed in a dispersal draft, as John was selected by the Dallas Chaparrals. But he didn't want to play for them. He bought himself out of his contract as the SuperSonics were eager to sign him, even against the NBA commissioner's wishes. John signed a 5-year, $1 million contract with the team, joining a squad led by Spencer Haywood, Fred Brown, and Dick Snyder. Although he started at the 3, his minutes went way down to only about 23 a game, and his numbers suffered as well, as he only dropped 8 20-point games and 4 30-point games. The NBA didn't have the 3-point line yet, and John wasn't much of a slasher, so he had to settle for a lot of contested mid-range jumpers, as he averaged 13 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 2 assists on a career-low 43% shooting. Despite the young talent on the team, the Sonics were still very bad offensively, finishing 26-56, missing the playoffs. In 1973, the team changed their whole identity when they hired NBA legend Bill Russell as the executive and head coach, as he brought a no-nonsense attitude to the team. However, John's violent tendencies followed him to the NBA. On the 4th day of training camp, he and forward Joby Wright were going at each other every time down the floor, as it developed into a shoving match. Then eventually John threw a punch, breaking Joby's jaw and knocking out 4 of his teeth. Former teammate Slick Watts remembers, Joby hit the ground like a bag of potatoes. Brisker walked off. Ain't nobody said nothing. The gym was like a funeral. Ambulance came. Russell told everyone to go home. Joby left for the NBA after this incident, and his career will never be the same. Watts himself would be a victim to John's mean streak, as he was slapped by John after he blocked his shot, but he would apologize and the two became good friends afterwards. Coach Russell even brought in NFL legend Jim Brown to mentor John, and the two would develop a good friendship as well. Despite this, it had become well known around this time that John was using drugs, which probably affected his play and overall mood. Although John was a great scorer, Coach Russell felt that he didn't play team basketball, so he would sit the bench a lot. Only playing in 35 games this season, averaging 12.5 points, 4 rebounds, and 1.5 assists, including a 47-point, 14 rebound, and 5 assist effort against Kansas City Omaha. As the season was ending, John's perspective had shifted, especially since he was having a daughter, as his newfound responsibility caused him to self-reflect. The Sonics as a team improved slightly, finishing 36-46, but missing the playoffs. But by 1974, John was almost at the end of his rope with Bill Russell, and the two continued to butt heads, as he barely made the roster despite his hefty contract. 2 months into the season, he was buried on the bench. He would play once sparingly, then sit for another month. As you might expect, John was furious with his lack of playing time. The Sonics were trying to trade him, but they couldn't find any takers. In one of the few games this season where he got actual minutes, he dropped 28 points and 8 rebounds in a comeback win over the Blazers on January 31st. As a way to try to intimidate his coach, John would engage in an intense stare down with Russell, and this would pretty much mark the end of his time in Seattle. John only played 21 games this season, averaging 8 points, 1.5 rebounds, and 1 assist. Although the Sonics made the playoffs this season, John wasn't added to the playoff roster. Bill Russell had demoted John to the Eastern Basketball Association this season, as he played 3 games for the Cherry Hill Rookies, dropping 51, 58, and 29. During the offseason, John's jazz club, the New Heritage House, closed after it was found that he owed $40,000 in rent, back taxes, and insurance. In October 1975, John walked into the front office and shook hands with Russell and assistant coach Bob Hopkins. He had 3 years left on his contract, but he didn't practice. A reporter asked Bill if John would be offered a uniform, and he said no. Then after this, John took a random trip to Africa. According to Spencer Haywood, about a year or so later, he visited John in New York, as he had recently returned from Africa. Spencer said that John was always interested in Africa and going back to his roots, as other teammates remember him borrowing books about Africa and wearing dashikis. During the week-long reunion, it was clear that John still had a grudge against Russell, and he was talking about returning to Africa, as Haywood tried to take his passport. "You don't need to go back over there," he said. "You don't sound too healthy, and there is some anger that you need to deal with it. It's not Russell, it's you." Haywood says he thought John was getting involved in some very dark, shady places. Brisker showed him a picture of the Ugandan dictator Idi Amin, although he wasn't completely sure. Either way, didn't like Haywood's intrusion and left. "I never did see him anymore," Haywood said. In March 1978, John traveled to Uganda to launch an import-export business. The last confirmed communication from him was on April 11, 1978, when he called his girlfriend in Seattle. While I won't get into the conspiracy theories about his disappearance, I will say that he didn't leave his family on the best terms, as his mother and brother hadn't seen him in years, and his ex-wife claims that he was abusive to her. John left behind a daughter, his house in Redmond, and $29,000 in his bank account. In order to solve the dispute about his estate, he was declared dead in absentia on May 29, 1985, after he had been missing for 7 years. It's been over 50 years since anyone has seen John, so who knows where he's at. While he was playing though, he was a dynamic scorer who could rebound like a big man, but his quick temper and constant fights ruined his reputation and pushed him out of the league a lot earlier than expected. He finished his career as a 2-time ABA All-Star, a second-team All-ABA member, and a 1970 All-ABA Rookie Team member, averaging 21 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists for his career. John's disappearance is still one of the biggest mysteries in basketball history, and it looks like it may never be solved. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys for watching these videos, man. It's just so many crazy stories because it seems like you really have to dig to find stuff about the ABA. It's not like they're suppressing it or anything. It's just like, it's so little information on it that you have to really dig. And even on Basketball Reference, they don't even have all the games. He comes into the league, he's a very good player in the beginning, but he's a hothead, he's punchy, he's fighting guys. And as soon as he leaves the NBA, he goes to Africa, Uganda, and he just disappeared. Maybe he got away from everything. Maybe it was like a depression that he wasn't playing basketball anymore. I don't know what it is, but I wonder what he's been doing this whole time if he hasn't been Dan. Thank you for watching. Really appreciate you guys. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Hit that subscribe button if you're new to my channel. Thank you. Please be safe. Stay on the grind. I'm out. Peace.